In this video essay, I want to take a look at the evolution of the white gaze and the role it's played in black filmmaking. I'll examine its relation to three different films, each in distinct eras. Ultimately, I'll argue that though it was limiting in the early days of black cinema, the subversion of the white gaze in recent years has become a tool for black liberation and freedom of expression. Before getting into the films, let me define the white gaze. Toni Morrison once called it the little white man that sits on your shoulder and checks out everything you do or say. NPR staff writer L.J. Alonge said, "I'd try to write a scene about two kids trying to dine and dash, something I'd done, and stopped to wonder if I was playing into narratives about black criminality." Essentially, it's the assumption that the default reader or viewer is white, or that people of color sometimes feel pressured to take that reader or viewer's reaction into account. First, I'll talk about Sidney Poitier and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner from 1967. As we know, this film addressed the then touchy subject of interracial marriage. Black Sidney Poitier meets the skeptical family of his white fiancée. However, as Donald Bogle points out, its analysis was pretty surface level. Bogle says, "There stood Poitier, charming, good-looking, mannerly, and brilliant. Who could refuse him for a son-in-law?" That was part of Kramer's point, of course, but it was far too simplistic. This is symptomatic of Poitier's entire filmography. Frankly, he always embodied the white liberal's wet dream. He served an undeniably important role in advancing black representation on screen, though he never really presented anything other than the perfect, regal black man that white audiences deemed acceptable, with the exception of the slap from In the Heat of the Night. Also, as Bogle said, the director of this movie was Stanley Kramer, a white man, and the writer was a white man as well, so naturally Sidney's role was subject to the white male gaze. In conclusion, Sidney and other performers and filmmakers of his time were constricted or even entirely controlled by the white gaze, and were never given much wiggle room to challenge stereotypes and accepted tropes. Then came Spike Lee. Spike's rise to stardom in the 1980s was contingent upon his complete lack of concern for the white gaze. Unlike the films of Sidney's era, in which almost all signs of black aesthetic were suppressed, Spike presented the black aesthetic in its full glory, particularly with Do the Right Thing in 1989. The film was replete with black music like Public Enemy's Fight the Power, Afrocentric depictions of beauty, particularly with Mother, Sister, and Jade's hair scene, the intertwining of black athletes in fashion like Mookie's Jackie Robinson jersey or Buggin' Out's Jordans, black liberationists like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X whose ideologies guide the film, and much, much more. Whereas films that were guided by the white gaze did not genuinely acknowledge racial tensions or ended in some sort of catharsis between black and white characters, Do the Right Thing served as a stark reminder that racism still runs rampant in the United States. Overall, Spike's work represents the white gaze's descent to irrelevance in the eyes of black filmmakers. In 2017, Jordan Peele took it a step further than irrelevance. His film Get Out overtly satirizes the white gaze. The film addresses the white liberal fetishization of black people and black culture. There are scenes of old white liberals assessing Daniel Kaluuya's character Chris and his physique, resulting in the literal attempted purchase of Chris's body, analogous to slave auctioning, by a blind white man who wants to exploit Chris's artistic vision literally and figuratively. He wants Chris's eye for photography. Professor Vlad Dima, writing about the film in relation to the white gaze, says, "Not only is the body of the black person repossessed, but its literal and symbolic vision, as well as its history, are also being reappropriated. This body is reduced to an empty vessel to be commandeered by the brain of a white person." I don't want to reduce their importance as pioneers, but this is basically what the roles of early black actors forced them to do: suppress their blackness and appear as on-screen projections of white writing, directing, and ideals. In Get Out, however, Chris does not allow that to happen. He kills the entire white family and escapes, and in doing so he subverts the white gaze. In Sidney's era, the white gaze was a restriction to black expression. Over time, though, its gradual loss of significance has catalyzed black expression and liberation. Of course, this is not without exception. There were films decades ago that were much more defiant of the white gaze than some of their contemporaries, and not every recent film has challenged standards of white normativity. But, for the most part, the white gaze has either been cast to the side or intentionally subverted in modern cinema, indicative of cinema's transition from a repression of black thought to a beacon of black liberation.